Hi, I'm Josh McGrath,
I'm Andrew Haas.
and this is the Art in Pursuit podcast. Not so long ago, when people dated, they did so with the understanding that it had the potential to lead towards marriage. But today, that assumption has faded. People still crave romantic connection, yet far fewer see marriage as the goal. Even within Christian or conservative circles, the mention of marriage can make some people recoil. Why? Because to many, especially women, marriage feels like a relic of a patriarchal past, a system where women were expected to rely on a man to survive.
Modern feminism has reshaped that narrative. It's told women, both in and outside the church, that they don't need marriage. They can chase their dreams, build careers, earn great money, buy homes, live independently, free from the oppression of men, marriage, and family. And this shift isn't just anecdotal, it's measurable. Men across all age groups now lean more conservative than liberal. At the same time, women's liberal identification has risen sharply, especially among the youngest and oldest age groups.
You know, our beliefs shape our behavior, and political identity is no exception. What we believe affects who we date, how we date, and why we date. Today, we're diving into that divide. We'll explore how worldview, gender, and politics shape the dating experience, and why men and women often walk into a relationship with such different expectations. So, Andrew, we're going to start off today's episode by looking at a 2025 NBC poll where they asked, a bunch of women and men aged 18 to 29 this question: which of the following is important to your personal definition of success?
Yes, it is a very interesting poll that shows the divide of values, more so beyond the divide of politics.
This poll asked women and men who voted for Trump, as well as women and men who voted for Harris, to select their top 3 choices out of 13 different categories when it comes to how they would define feeling successful.
I'm going to read the 13 items from most important to least important. Again, this was for men who voted for Trump. Most important: having children, achieving financial independence, having a job or career you find fulfilling, being married, having enough money to do the things you want to do, owning your own home, being spiritually grounded, making your family or community proud, having no debt, using your talents and resources to help others, being able to retire early, having emotional stability, and fame and influence.
This really gives us some very interesting insights into what is happening in the modern dating world. And that's why we're looking at this today. And while there are many takeaways, there are 3 that we're going to examine today. And that first one is there's actually a 5-degree difference between men and women who voted for Trump when it comes to their views on marriage making them feel successful. So men list being married as number 4, and women list being married as number 9.
That is a big gap.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah, and I think that shows us something's going on here, and that's part of why we're even doing this. But we want to bring this to the forefront of young men, older men, as you're considering the relationship scene. These are things that you're unfortunately going to need to pay attention to.
I think that for a lot of people who are actively dating or want to be in a romantic relationship, particularly for men, they are very aware that there's a fairly large difference between men and women today when it comes to our views on relationships and marriage than perhaps any other time in human history. And I think what this poll reveals is that the 5-degree difference when it comes to our views on marriage and its importance in our lives, that really highlights, men and women, even in conservative, maybe more religious backgrounds, really do view marriage quite differently. We're not as closely aligned as perhaps we once were.
And to that point, the second takeaway here is that on this list, there are 5 items related to finances ahead of marriage for women and only 2 for men. Now, why is that interesting? Historically, men were traditionally the providers financially. So we see here that for women, that's actually very important to them. And I think what happened here, men really dropped the ball when it comes to obviously not providing financially, but I think providing in other spheres in a relationship. Men did not really show themselves to be trustworthy or reliable. And women now see it as very important to be able to financially provide for themselves.
Yeah, let's take a look at the top 5 for women here. It's achieving financial independence, having a job or career you find fulfilling, owning your own home, being spiritually grounded, having enough money to do the things you want to do. So we've got, financial independence, career, owning a home, and having enough money to do what you want to do. And for men, we've got, having children as number 1. It's a little weird because that's obviously out of order.
Yes.
Marriage should come before children, but whatever. But then you have achieving financial independence, having a job or career you find fulfilling, and then being married. And in our culture, even if you're conservative, even if you're religious, even if you have a biblical worldview, the reality is money, independence, autonomy, apart from marriage, apart from men, has become a key factor for many, if not most women today.
And I think one of these subtle undertones here that we don't want to miss is, and I don't know who wrote these questions or how it was decided, the 13, and who came up with all that, but it is interesting that a lot of them are self-focused, and so much of a relationship, a large part of a successful relationship is being others-focused. And it's been shown to just be healthy in life to be others-focused, but especially in a relationship, for it to last, there's got to be an orientation toward the other person, toward life that's bigger than me. Now, clearly, have goals, have pursuits. Those are good things. But what I find a little concerning, in this data here, people do have an orientation toward what they want, and they can over-prioritize that at the expense of what would be healthy for a relationship.
I think that highlights well our third takeaway, which is men list marriage and children as key factors in feeling successful, listing both of those in their top 4, whereas for women, neither of those appear even in their top 5. And obviously, if having children, which is number 1, is listed, that means that answer is the most commonly chosen choice for men, which is really interesting that, having children was more important to men, was selected more often than even marriage.
And I think that's something that men need to be careful of and guard, because that's probably, I would say, how we ended up in this mess. If you look at this, I mean, it's a mess. Women are so far off from where men are. And in part, men could prioritize things out of order. And in this case, children. Every guy should desire children. Has to be in the right order. And so if men only were to view women as a means to get children, I mean, it's pretty clear how problematic that is.
Oh, for sure. And for a lot of men in our culture, they want to find a woman who's got similar values, a similar worldview. And so it can be easy to think that, well, if she goes to church, if she says she's a Christian, if she says she's conservative, she said she voted for Trump, if she didn't get the COVID shot, then she's like the type of woman for me. And that, at the end of the day, is actually kind of a bad proxy to use, because we have again, it's a simple example here, but you've got a bunch of women who voted for Trump. Likely many of them are religious conservative women. And what you're going to notice is marriage isn't even making the top 5 things that make them feel successful. So as a man, if you're like, hey, where do I find a woman that's going to align with my values, vision, and worldview? Well, let me go to, a conservative conference and I'll probably find her there. Well, you're statistically more likely to find her there, but it's definitely not a guarantee.
And I think part of the breakdown here is that somewhere in the past, men started devaluing marriage and family and started over prioritizing their careers. And in my opinion, this is the fruit of what has happened over, say, the past several decades or longer. Men, in neglecting families, in neglecting their marriages, overemphasizing their work, putting what I would call too much time into their work. That's left women feeling burnt out, feeling like marriage isn't worth it. It's not going to work out. And so what do women do? They pivot to the things that look like are successful. You know, what are guys doing that are successful? Oh, it's their careers. Okay, well, I'll do that and I'll find success and I'll find fulfillment there. And so for guys that are interested in relationships, it's really important that they understand the value and the balance. Everything's got to be within reason. Pursue what you need, pursue an income, pursue a job, pursue a career, but don't do that at the expense of a healthy relationship.
One of the lies of feminism is it states to women that our goal is just to be equal to men. But in reality, the purpose of feminism is to be the same as men, to derive your value from the same place as men derive their value, to copy what men do so you can be like them. So if the man goes to work and works an executive job, then you've got to go to work and work the executive job. If the guy's at the office 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you've got to be at the office 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And so there is not this recognition of perhaps men and women are different, which any sane person knows, and perhaps we derive value from different places and different things, which any sane person knows. The lie of feminism is that it tells women that what a man does, they need to do, and the way men find their value, communicate, live their life, is the way you need to find your value, communicate, and live your life.
It's funny because if you follow that, if you go further down that road, if men are the source of a lot of problems that we face,
Which they are.
I actually think they are.
They absolutely are.
I think more specifically, the selfishness of men is the source of a lot of the problems that we face.
Definitely.
So there's some legitimacy there, but it's not women doing all the things that men do, because that would just mean we have a bigger pie of problematic people.
And so one of the things that this, poll represents is that even for the conservative woman, the Trump voting woman, the religious woman, she is likely being heavily influenced by a cultural narrative that tells her that she needs to chase career, financial independence, financial wealth, financial sustainability. And while none of that's wrong, none of that's bad, if that is your sole goal and marriage comes way down the list after that, yeah, when it comes to meeting a man who's like, hey, I want to be married, it's going to feel like your visions don't align because they don't.
And there's a difference, like you were just saying, between, pursuing a career, buying a house, doing those things that can be really good, while still remaining open to a relationship or marriage.
Sure.
You wouldn't want to do those things at the expense of creating space for marriage to be a possibility.
Yes. And this is one of the reasons why we encourage men to be clear about their intentions up front. And one of the things that, in light of this reality, that men need to begin to implement when it comes to the pursuit of a romantic relationship is to ask early on the woman if she's interested in marriage. And I know that's like probably a big taboo thing in our culture, and probably many women out there would disagree and be like, no, you should never ask that, particularly early on. But here's the question. If he's not supposed to ask it early on, when is he supposed to ask it? When the stars magically align, when you're in the emotionally perfect moment, when you've gone on the absolute finest date of your life? A man doesn't have 6, 12, 18, 24 months to waste in hopes that at some point down the road, he can find out whether you're interested in marriage. Not necessarily marriage to him, just marriage, period. And so a man has to be willing early on in that relationship process to ask the question, hey, are you interested in being married?
And to add to that, a guy, not only should he ask early, but it's important that he does so respectfully,
of course,
without pressure. And we've covered some of these topics before. So a woman shouldn't be put off by the question. What can sometimes land the wrong way can be his insistence, persistence, the
intensity,
the articulation of a certain timeline. Yeah. All those things can put pressure on a woman to have to come up with an answer. And it's like, well, no, it can be a conversation to have. And so, yeah, guys should be able to lean into those conversations early on. Just do it the right way.
Yeah. You can ask it as simply as, hey, what are your thoughts on marriage? Do you want to get married someday?
Yeah.
It's a very low stake question, but unfortunately, like we talked about in the opening, because many people in our culture, bristle at the idea of marriage, sadly, that can actually trigger a woman to respond negatively. And my encouragement to any of our female listeners is don't respond negatively. Recognize that this is a man who's being intentional. And don't waste his time, just as you wouldn't want him to waste your time, right? We've heard so many stories of women who have been in dating relationships for 2, 4, 6, 8 years, waiting for the man to propose. It is unloving for him to drag her on through that long relationship without the intention of proposing to her. And in the same way, it is unloving for a woman to not be honest and upfront with the man if he asks, are you interested in being married? Again, not to him, marriage in general.
Yes. And yeah, men need to be ready and willing to hear any answer that she decides to give.
And the goal is not to, piece out of that relationship if she's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily see myself being married.
Right. And that's where the nuance is, because as a guy, if you're like pretty convinced that you want to marry this girl and you're willing to navigate that and you're willing to walk that road, yeah, it could be a tricky road to walk. And maybe there's lots of conversations and maybe there's a timeline that doesn't necessarily align with what you're hoping for. But you can, men can be part of the change. Healthy men can help shift culture back toward a place where talking about marriage is more commonplace and more normal.
And one of the ways that you can actually get to know each other really well is by having those deeper conversations, by drawing out from her, well, tell me, why don't you see marriage as, part of your future? Now, one of the things that you might discover as a man is that marriage is part of our future, but she wants to accomplish, I don't know, let's say 10 different things first before she gets married. That, having goals is awesome. A woman who's goal-oriented, that's an incredible woman. Hopefully every man wants to be with a goal-oriented woman.
And part of what he'll have to navigate through those conversations is, are these in the right order? Are these priorities? Are these desires? Are these pursuits in the right order? Or will they naturally shift around as time goes on? She might be super interested in a list of things before she gets married. My wife was that way. I know a lot of women they somehow come into this identity that I have to check off all these things, or I want to check off all these things before I get married, as if somehow marriage prohibits those things from happening, which they don't. It just means, you have a few new things to navigate.
I actually think about things like, we've talked about this before, about like debt. I've known many women who have been so good, so faithful about paying off their student loans. They work hard, they spend very little so that they can pay off their loans in their entirety. That's awesome. And that's a great goal. And as a woman, perhaps her goal is, I want to pay off my student loans before I'm in a relationship or before married. Before married. That's a great goal. So as the guy who's dating her, pursuing her romantically, part of what you've got to figure out is, well, this is a great goal. Hopefully as the man, you're not like, no, don't pay off your student loans. I want to marry you and your debt. Hopefully that's not your goal. Hopefully your goal is to see her pay off her student loans. But perhaps the conversation you're going to have is, well, what does the season of paying off those student loans look like? Does it look like you remaining single, or does it look like you being married? And part of the role and responsibility of a man is to shoulder the burden and responsibility of caring for a wife.
Yes.
And so part of that discussion may be the man saying, look, I love you, and I actually want to shoulder the weight of your student loans and help pay them off.
And I think that might be the really important thing to take home here for men and for women. These are all great things to pursue, travel, work, education, getting out of debt, as you mentioned, but don't have them be deal breakers. If you want a 4-year and an 8-year degree before you get married, pursue the degree, but don't necessarily hold it at the expense of a relationship or marriage. And your debt example is a great one. Have the goal of being out of debt before you get married, but don't have it as a deal breaker.
I think a lot of men, and I actually believe this is part of the problem of the current dating culture, there is this assumption that you both have to be perfectly aligned on everything, and that the person you're pursuing should not radically change, disrupt, or inconvenience your life. Which is absolutely insane.
Yes.
Because you cannot invite some person into the intimacy of your life 24/7 and not expect your life to be completely disrupted. And so something that men have to recognize is your goal is not to try to find a woman who provides the least disruption to your life. Because that's not the goal of a marriage. The goal of the marriage is to find a woman that aligns with your values and your vision. You need to be a man who has a vision, that can cast that vision, who can be clear about that vision, who invites her into that vision, and together you walk out that vision as partners in the things that God is calling you to.
And I think that point is actually worth repeating. We aren't bringing someone into our life. You know, men don't bring a wife to make their life easier. Now, your life will get easier in some ways, and that's by design. It should be that way. But the goal is not, my life has these challenges and I need a woman to come solve them. Not at all. In fact, a lot of you getting better as a man is going to be through her revealing the selfishness, the frustrations, the inconsistencies, all the little things in your life that you might get away with without being married. You bring someone in, yeah, you'll become a better person, but not through an easy path.
And that is so true. And when I look at this list here, it's funny because, you know, owning a home, for instance, for men comes after having children and being married. Whereas for women, that's a priority before being married and having children. And so one of the things that I think that men have to recognize is that your values and your priorities and your vision may be different than the woman that you're pursuing. And the goal isn't to say, well, until I find the perfect one,
right,
I'm not going to be in a relationship. The goal is actually to say, all right, what information do I need to have to determine whether or not to move this relationship towards the decision of either covenant or not covenant? And so, you know, each relationship is unique. That's why we encourage men to have authority and accountability in their lives. They need to invite outside counsel. They need to have wisdom to know how to navigate that. Because if I'm sitting down with a man who's like, hey, I'm dating this great girl, she's amazing, but her priority is she wants to own a home before she gets married. And I'm like, who cares if we own a home? Let's just get married. I'm like, okay, that's not a deal breaker to me. There's a misalignment right now of visions, but I believe there's the ability to align those visions so that you guys can get married. But how you do that will look different from situation to situation. And there might come a moment in time where you realize our values truly aren't aligning. Our visions truly aren't aligning.
Yeah, I mean, they could be far enough apart that, yeah, it's just not going to work out. And that's a reality that men need to be on board with. But men need to recognize that, yes, they probably have it harder today than men in the past did, simply because the gap is wider.
Sure.
But that gap isn't necessarily the thing that will prevent a successful relationship. It just means, as a guy, you've got more work to do. But that's what we're about.
Yeah.
As men, we put in the work, we put in the time, we put forward the mental energy to figure these things out. Again, yeah, as you said, it's not about finding a woman who aligns on debt, owning a home, marriage, kids, all in the right order. It's about, through conversation and through discussion, figuring out, can we move closer together to where it's actually going to work?
And one of the lies of the social media world is it paints this picture that if there's a disagreement on like any core value, that must mean you have to like break up. You can't be together. And so you get all of these videos online of, particularly women, but sometimes men too, who go on, a first date, or they were just on their second, third, or fourth date. And there's like a complete divergence of opinion on something that she or he finds very valuable or important. And then they make this whole like rant video being like, well, we can never be together. And it's like, well, part of human relationship is that there's going to be tension. You're not going to agree on everything. And that's okay. And so if the man is looking at this pool from NBC and being like, man, there's no hope for me.
I'm never going to find a woman because, all women want to own a house before they get married. And it's like, well, no. First of all, brother, that is not true at all. Stop spiraling down, doom scrolling here. Lift your head, be a man of purpose and vision. All right. You can find godly, conservative, great women out there. And part of your job is to bring them on that journey of understanding your vision. What has God called you to? And as you're bringing them into that vision, you've already alluded to this, part of what she's going to do is help refine that vision. It's not like you're the captain of the ship and she's like the poor, person down in the hull of the ship that you only see when you come home late at night. No, she's like right there with you, all right? You're responsible for that ship, but she's your first mate. She's right there helping you on that journey.
And for men, it's important to remember that being able to speak clearly, articulate why you think marriage is a good idea, cast vision for your life, through this type of communication, you will likely, or it's very possible that you can bring her on board with where you want to go. And that can actually create in her a desire to be in a relationship with you. And so guys need to just not look at a woman and her desires as seeing them as, wow, they're so far off. But through discussion, you can actually bring her around to where you want to go. And it's not just a one-way street, right? She's going to communicate what she's about and where her life is going. And through that, the two people can actually see, hopefully, this can go somewhere.
And I've said it before, people buy into vision, they don't buy into plans. And so what you want to do as the man is you want to cast that vision. You're not manipulating her. You're not pressuring her. You're not giving her ultimatums. You're casting a vision and inviting her along. I think that's a great place to stop. So, gentlemen, let's be honest. You can blame the culture, the politics, the stats, or the state of modern women, but none of that will move your life forward. And nothing is less attractive than a man complaining about why he isn't in a relationship. We've said it before, be intentional. That still holds true for your sake and hers. If you're dating or thinking about it, ask the real question early. Is marriage something you want someday? You're not proposing, you're discerning. And clarity now saves heartbreak later because your time and your future is too valuable to invest in someone who doesn't share your vision. If marriage isn't on her radar, walk away. No matter how stunning, smart, or spiritually mature she seems, if she's not building toward what you're building toward, she's not the one. If it is, then great. You'll have more to talk about. But lead with purpose, date with vision, pursue with clarity. We'll see you here next time.